Have you ever looked at someone and suddenly understood something you never noticed before? If you have, leave a comment below. Subscribe if you want more stories that say the quiet things out loud. Sometimes the people closest to us become invisible. Not because they disappear, but because we stop really looking. This is a story about what happens when someone finally sees again. My front door lock broke one Tuesday night. It was old and rusty. Nothing exciting. I needed somewhere to stay, so I called her. She lived nearby and always told me her door was open if I ever needed help. Her house sat at the edge of our small town. It had 2 bedrooms and a little garden out back. Everything about that place held memories. I got there late in the evening. She answered the door wearing a light blue bathrobe, tied loosely around her waist. Her hair hung down past her shoulders. She spoke quietly and said I could sleep in the extra bedroom. The sheets were already clean and ready. I thanked her and she gave me a small, kind smile. We ate some leftover food from her refrigerator. She poured us both some wine. We didn't talk very much. She asked me about my job. I asked how her knees were doing. She laughed and said they still hurt whenever it rained outside. At 11:30 at night. She said goodnight and went to her bedroom. I stayed awake on the couch, scrolling through my phone and listening to how quiet the house was. Around 12:43, I got really thirsty. I walked into the kitchen without my shoes on. The lights were turned down low. The air smelled like mint tea and maybe some whiskey. She was standing by the kitchen counter. No shoes, still in her bathrobe. Her hair messy. Her eyes looking soft and tired. She said she couldn't fall asleep. I nodded to show I understood. She made some tea, then changed her mind and poured wine instead. She told me she used to drink alone all the time, but it felt different knowing someone else was in the house. When she handed me the glass, her fingers touched mine for just a moment. We sat down at the kitchen table in the same chairs. The room was quiet again. She started talking about the past. She said she used to think about how she looked years ago, before people stopped noticing her. She used to wear pretty dresses, bright lipstick and high-heeled shoes. People used to look at her when she walked by. Her bathrobe slipped down a little bit on one side. She didn't pull it back up. She told me she didn't miss being young exactly. What she really missed was being noticed by others. I looked at her carefully. The light from the kitchen lamp showed her neck and shoulder. Her voice sounded sad but honest. I told her that people still see her. She smiled, but it was a sad kind of smile. She said it wasn't the same anymore. Then she reached across the table and held my hand. Her thumb moved gently across my palm. She said she didn't want to be careful anymore. I told her she didn't have to be. She leaned forward until her forehead touched mine. I could feel her warm breath. Her hand moved to rest flat against my chest. We didn't kiss each other. We didn't say anything more. We just sat like that, very close together, feeling all the things we probably shouldn't have felt. In that moment, I understood something important. She wasn't wishing she was young again. She just wanted to feel real and seen by someone. She didn't ask why I was still awake. She just poured another glass, but this time it was wine instead of tea. Dark red wine that looked almost black in the dim kitchen light. Her bathrobe had slipped down more, showing her shoulder and the edge of her collarbone, the place where her skin met the fabric of her robe. She didn't fix it or seem to notice. I sat across from her at the table. Same chair, same quiet. She stared at the wine glass like it held something more important than just a drink. Then she looked directly at me. She told me she used to drink wine with my grandfather, but he never really looked at her when they drank together. I didn't say anything back. She kept talking. She said he would sit in the exact chair I was sitting in now. He would talk about the weather outside, or about his car, or about anything except her. Her voice didn't shake when she spoke. It just got quieter and sadder. She told me she used to wonder if she was invisible to him, or if she was just inconvenient. I watched her carefully. I noticed how her fingers wrapped around the stem of the wine glass. I saw how her bathrobe moved when she leaned forward. I heard how soft her voice became when she said the word inconvenient. I told her she wasn't invisible. She smiled again, that same soft, sad, real smile. She said, "Not to you." Then she reached out and took my hand. Her thumb brushed against my palm slowly. She said she didn't know what this was between us. I said I didn't know either. She looked down at the table, then back up at me. She said she just knew it felt like something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Her hand stayed on mine. I didn't move mine away. The wine sat on the table and nobody drank it. The silence in the room felt full of meaning. She stood up slowly and walked into the living room. She left the door open behind her. I followed her. She sat down on the couch, right in the middle, not in the corner. She didn't look at me when I came into the room. She just said one word, "Sit." I sat down on the couch. Not right next to her, but not far away either. Just close. She pulled her bathrobe tighter around herself, but not enough to hide the neckline. Not enough to hide how the light from the kitchen reflected on her skin. She said, "I used to think that being close to someone meant moving and doing things together. But maybe being close is really about being still together." I nodded because I understood what she meant. She turned to face me. Her eyes stared right at me without blinking. She said again that she didn't want to be careful anymore. I told her she didn't have to be. She leaned forward. Her forehead pressed against mine. Her breath felt warm on my face. Her hand moved to my chest, fingers spread out, palm flat against me. We didn't kiss. We didn't talk. We just sat there together. Her body was close to mine. Her eyes looked steady into mine. The air around us felt thick and heavy with all the feelings we weren't supposed to have. Her leg touched mine, bare skin against bare skin. It felt warm and still. She whispered that she felt safe. I nodded because I felt safe too. She turned her body a little bit, curling toward me. Her hand moved to my neck. Her thumb brushed along the edge of my jaw. She said, "I'm not asking you for anything." I said, "I know." She smiled and then rested her head on my shoulder. We stayed in that position for a long time. Just breathing, just being there together. Not speaking at all. The wine stayed on the table. Nobody drank it. The silence stayed full of unspoken things. Her fingers moved one more time, tracing a line along my collarbone, then resting just below it. Not searching for anything, just remembering what it felt like to touch someone. She said quietly, "I used to think I was broken inside." She paused. "But maybe I was just waiting." I asked, "Waiting for what?" She didn't answer my question. She just closed her eyes. Her breathing got slower. Her hand stayed on me. Her leg curled around mine, in that silence. I felt something I hadn't felt in many years. It wasn't desire exactly. It wasn't guilt either. It was just the weight of being wanted by someone who had every reason not to want anyone, but chose to want me anyway. We didn't really sleep that night. We just drifted together in that quiet space. She didn't speak for a long time after that. The living room was quiet and dark except for the light coming from the kitchen doorway. She sat in the middle of the couch, not curled up or protected, just open. Her bathrobe had slipped again, not in a big way, just enough to show the soft line of her shoulder, the edge of her chest, the place where skin becomes memory. I sat close to her, but we weren't touching yet. She held her wine glass loosely, her fingers barely gripping the stem, like she wasn't sure if she wanted to drink it or put it down. Her eyes looked toward the window, but she wasn't really looking outside. She was somewhere else in her mind. She told me she used to sit in this exact spot with him. With my grandfather before he stopped talking to her. I stayed quiet. She continued talking. She said he would sit right where I was sitting, watching the news on television, saying nothing to her. She would sit on the couch and pretend she didn't notice how he ignored her. She took a sip of wine. Her throat moved as she swallowed. Her breath caught in her chest. She said, "I don't miss him. I miss being looked at." I turned my body toward her. She didn't move at all. I said, "I see you." She smiled, but not with her mouth. Her eyes smiled. She said, "I know. That's the part I don't know what to do with." She put the wine glass down on the table. It made a soft clinking sound. Then she turned toward me. Her leg brushed against mine. Bare skin touching bare skin. Still warm. Her hand reached out and touched my forearm. Her thumb moved slowly, tracing the line of a vein under my skin. She said, "I don't want to be careful." I said, "You're not." She leaned in close. Her forehead touched mine. Her breath was warm against my face. A hand moved to my chest. Fingers spread wide. Palm pressed flat. We didn't kiss each other. We didn't talk. We just sat there with her body close to mine. Her eyes looking steady into mine. The air between us thick with everything we weren't supposed to feel. Her bathrobe shifted again. She didn't fix it. Her thigh pressed gently against mine. Her hand slid slightly, resting just below my collarbone. Not searching, just staying. She whispered, "I used to think I was broken, but maybe I was just waiting to be seen." I didn't answer because I didn't need to say anything. She closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed down. Her hand stayed on me. I watched her face. The way her lips opened slightly. The way her hair fell across her cheek. The way her body leaned into mine like it had always belonged there. She didn't ask me to hold her, but I did anyway. My arm moved around her shoulders. Her head rested against my chest. Her fingers curled gently into the fabric of my shirt. We stayed in that position for a long time. Just breathing, just drifting, not speaking. The wine stayed on the table, untouched. The silence stayed full of meaning. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not desire, not guilt. Just the weight of being chosen by someone who had every reason not to choose anyone, but chose me anyway. She didn't fall asleep, not really. She just let go of something she'd been holding. And I stayed with her. She was already awake when I opened my eyes the next morning. The house was quiet, with the kind of quietness that doesn't ask questions. The kind that just waits. I didn't know how long I'd been asleep. I didn't know if she had slept at all. But I knew she hadn't moved from where we were. Her head had rested on my chest for hours. Her breathing had stayed slow and steady. Her hand had stayed on me the whole time. But now the couch was empty. The blanket was folded neatly. The wine glasses were gone. I found her in the kitchen. She stood by the stove without shoes, wearing a soft blouse and linen pants. Her hair was pulled back loosely, with a few pieces falling around her face. She didn't look surprised to see me. She didn't look away. She asked, "Coffee?" I nodded yes. She poured a cup for me. Her hand shook a little bit. She noticed it was shaking. She didn't try to hide it. I sat down at the table in the same chair as before. Same silence as always. She put the coffee cup in front of me. Her fingers brushed mine for just a second. Then she sat down across from me. Not beside me, not far away. Just across. She said, "I didn't sleep much." I said, "Me either." She looked at me. Her eyes didn't blink. She said, "I kept thinking about the way you looked at me." I didn't say anything back. She kept talking. "It wasn't pity," she said. "It wasn't confusion. It was something else." I nodded because she was right. It was something else. She reached for her coffee cup and held it with both hands. Her blouse slipped down slightly on one side. She didn't fix it. She said, I used to think mornings were for starting over and forgetting yesterday. Now I think they're for remembering. I watched her. The way her fingers curled around the ceramic cup. The way her voice got softer when she said remembering. I said, I remember everything. She smiled that soft, sad, real smile again. She said, I don't know what this makes us. I said, something honest. She looked down at her coffee, then back up at me. She said, I'm not ashamed. I said, neither am I. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her thumb brushed against the edge of my palm. She said, I don't want to pretend this didn't happen. I said, then don't. She stood up slowly and walked to the window. The morning light caught her shoulder, the edge of her collarbone, the curve of her neck. She turned around and her blouse shifted. She didn't fix it. She said, I used to think I was waiting for someone to come back to me, but maybe I was waiting for someone to stay. I stood up and walked over to her, close but not touching her. I said, I'm here. She looked at me. Her eyes didn't blink. She said, I know. Her hand reached out and touched my chest. Her fingers curled gently around my shirt. Her breathing slowed down. We didn't kiss. We didn't speak. We just stood there with her body close to mine, her eyes looking steady at me, the air between us thick with all the feelings we weren't supposed to feel. Later on, she made breakfast. Eggs and toast, nothing fancy or complicated. She moved slowly and carefully, like every action meant something important. I watched her, the way she spread butter on the toast, the way she hummed quietly under her breath, the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching her. We ate breakfast in silence. Not an awkward silence or an empty silence. Just a full silence. After we finished eating, she washed the dishes. I dried them with a towel. She handed me a plate. Our fingers touched. She didn't pull her hand away. She said, I don't know what happens next. I said, me either. She looked at me. Her eyes didn't blink. She said, but I don't want to go back to how things were before. I nodded because I didn't want that either. She reached for my hand and held it. Her thumb brushed against the edge of my palm. In that moment, I knew we weren't a mistake. We weren't a secret that needed to be hidden. We were a decision. Not a loud decision, not a simple decision, but a real one. She didn't talk about that night again. Not directly with words, but everything she did carried a memory of it. The way she poured coffee in the morning. The way she stood in the doorway longer than necessary. The way her fingers brushed mine when she handed me a plate. It wasn't that she was avoiding talking about it. It was something quieter than that. Something like treating it as special. I stayed at her house longer than I planned to. The days started to blur together. I fixed the water hose in her garden. She made vegetable soup. I changed the light bulb in the hallway. She left her bedroom door open when she was changing clothes. We didn't talk about boundaries or rules. We just existed together. Then someone knocked on the door. It was a Saturday afternoon. Sunlight was coming through the windows. Jazz music was playing softly. I was in the kitchen wiping down the counter. She was upstairs folding clean laundry. The knock was sharp and quick. 3 fast taps. I froze in place. She didn't freeze. She came downstairs slowly, wearing no shoes, with a soft blouse and linen pants on. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes looked steady and calm. She opened the front door. A woman stood there on the porch. She looked about 55 years old with short hair and sunglasses. A neighbor, maybe a friend, someone who used to visit more often before. The woman said, Evelyn, I was just passing through the neighborhood. Then she saw me standing in the kitchen. Her eyes got narrower. Not angry, just curious. She said, I didn't know you had company. Evelyn smiled. That soft, sad, real smile. She said, "He's helping me with some things around the house." The woman nodded, looked at me, then looked back at Evelyn. She said, "Well, I'll let you get back to it then." She left quickly. No hug, no real goodbye. Evelyn closed the door and turned to look at me. She said, "She used to bring me wine bottles as gifts. Now she brings silence and judgment." I didn't say anything. She kept talking. She said, "I don't want to explain myself to people." I said, "You don't have to." She walked to the window and stood there for a long time. Then she said, "I used to think I was waiting for someone to come back, that maybe I was waiting for someone to stay." I walked over to her, close but not touching. I said, "I'm here." She turned around. Her eyes didn't blink. She said, "I know." Her hand reached out and touched my chest. Her fingers curled gently. Her breathing slowed down. We didn't kiss. We didn't speak. We just stood there with her body close to mine, her eyes looking steady at me, the air between us thick with everything we weren't supposed to feel. Later that evening, we sat on the front porch together. The sun was getting low in the sky. The air smelled like rain coming and rosemary from her garden. She poured wine into 2 glasses. Her hand shook a little bit. She noticed it shaking. She didn't try to hide it. She said, "I used to think I was broken inside, that maybe I was just waiting to be seen by someone." I looked at her. Her blouse had slipped down slightly on one shoulder. She didn't pull it back up. I said, "I see you." She smiled, soft, sad, and certain this time. Then she reached for my hand and held it. Her thumb brushed against the edge of my palm. She said, "I don't know what this makes us." I said, "Something honest." She nodded, then leaned forward. Her forehead touched mine. Her breath was warm against my face. She said, "I'm not asking you for anything." I said, "I know." We sat like that until the sun completely disappeared, until the wine was all gone, until the silence felt like something we both chose instead of something that just happened. In that moment, I knew we weren't a mistake. We weren't a secret. We were a decision. Not a loud decision. Not a simple decision, but a real one. She didn't ask me to leave after that. Not after the porch, not after the wine. Not after the way her thumb brushed the edge of my palm and stayed there. I didn't ask if I should go. We just continued being together. I started visiting her house more often. Not every single day, but enough days. She would call me on the phone and say, "The kitchen faucet is acting up again." Or, "I made too much soup for one person." Or sometimes she didn't say anything at all to explain. Sometimes I would find her in the garden outside, kneeling down in the dirt, with her sleeves rolled up high, her neckline low, her hair pinned back but falling down anyway. She would look up at me, smile and say, "I didn't hear you come in the house." I would say, "I didn't knock this time." We didn't talk about that first night together. We didn't need to talk about it. It was in everything we did. The way she poured my coffee. The way I stayed in the doorway longer than I needed to. The way her hands rested on my arm a second longer than necessary. She started wearing softer clothes. Loose blouses and thin robes. Nothing dramatic or showy, just less guarded and protected. I started noticing things I hadn't noticed before. The way her collarbone moved when she laughed. The way her voice got lower when she said my name. The way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching. One evening, I came to her house with grocery bags. She was in the kitchen without shoes, wearing a pale grey dress that hung off one shoulder. She didn't fix it or pull it up. She said, "You didn't have to bring all this food." I said, "I wanted to." She smiled. Soft, sad, real. We cooked dinner together. She chopped the vegetables. I stirred the pot. She leaned close to me to reach the salt shaker. Her hand brushed mine. She didn't pull away. After dinner, we sat in the living room. Same couch as before. Same silence. She poured wine into glasses. Her hand shook a little. She noticed. She didn't hide it. She said, "I used to think I was waiting for someone to come back to me. That maybe I was waiting for someone to stay." I looked at her. Her dress had slipped down slightly. She didn't fix it. I said, "I'm here." She reached for my hand and held it. Her thumb brushed against the edge of my palm. She said, "I don't know what this makes us." I said, "Something honest." She leaned forward. Her forehead touched mine. Her breath was warm. She said, "I'm not asking you for anything." I said, "I know." We didn't kiss. We didn't speak anymore. We just sat there with her body close to mine, her eyes looking steady at me, the air between us thick with everything we weren't supposed to feel. Later, I helped her wash the dinner dishes. She handed me a plate to dry. Our fingers touched. She didn't pull away. She said, "I don't want to go back to how things were before." I said, "Then don't." She nodded, then turned off the kitchen light. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions. The kind that just waits. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in many years. Not desire, not guilt. Just the weight of being chosen by someone who had every reason not to choose anyone, but chose me anyway.